A very good day to everyone. This is Daniele Catteddu. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of the Cloud Security Alliance. It's a great pleasure for me to be here in this last session for this Cloud Trust Summit with Gabriela Mercuri, Managing Director of Scope Europe. Today with Gabriela, we are going to discuss about a very relevant and hot topic, which has been in the news for the last few years, which is GDPR. That piece of regulation that has generated certainly a lot of love and hate around the globe, a lot of confusion, a lot of people trying to figure out how to address the requirements included in the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe. And I think this is going to be a tremendous opportunity for our community to understand what Cloud Security Alliance is doing in collaboration with other relevant entities in this space in order to support our community. But without any further ado, I would like to give the floor to Gabriela. If you would like, Gabriela, to give us a brief introduction about yourself, and then we can get started.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Daniele and the CSA Star Registry team for having me here today. It's really a pleasure to come here to talk a little bit about Scope Europe, more particularly about the uCloud CC and our collaboration with the CSA. So for those who aren't familiar with Scope Europe, we are a Brussels-based organization that was established in 2017, specifically against the context of GDPR, of this very much anticipated, very crucial piece of regulation that has changed the game since it came into force. And so our goal is to build an organization that could host the development, negotiation, and monitor the implementation of codes of conduct under the GDPR. And the uCloud CUC is the very materialization of this goal, being the first ever European-wide data protection code of conduct to become operational back in 2021. And so for this code, Scope Europe has worked alongside the industry on its draft. It was its lead negotiator behind the code approval process. And since then, he has been acting as its secretariat as well as its accredited monitoring body, according to the requirements that are put forward by GDPR. And in this regard, maybe already interesting to highlight that the codes of conduct were not something completely new that GDPR brought forward. This was actually already present in its predecessor and under the directive. What's new, it's its format, and basically the key variable is exactly this monitoring body, Article 41, that comes forward to oversee the implementation of codes of conduct under GDPR. And the idea here is that GDPR is this very general regulation, right? It's tackling each and every sector of our economy, which led to quite vague provisions and raised exactly a lot of legal uncertainty. And knowing that, regulators put forward some tools to specify the implementation of GDPR in a specific context. And the word is exactly that, specify the implementation. So the goal here, when you think about codes of conduct, do you have additional requirements? What's the deal here? You need to put something on top of GDPR. Principally, not necessarily. You can go beyond. However, the idea is to really create specific guidance for the implementation in a certain sector or even a fraction of a sector, depending on the exact needs of certain processing activities, the risks that are entailed. So it's a very flexible tool, yet that can be developed in a quite robust way and needs to go through, again, a very strict approval process and also accreditation of its monitoring body. So I could go on and on here, but I will stop for the moment and let the details, and discuss the details throughout our conversation. But I hope this can already give you some context on Scope Europe and the uCloud Code of Conduct.
Thank you so much, Gabriela. So as you know, and as some members of our community are aware of, Cloud Security Alliance has already entered in the space of GDPR compliance. We have been developing over the course of the past few years what we can call a competitor of the EU Cloud Code of Conduct, our GDPR Code of Conduct for our Code of Conduct for GDPR compliance, which is a similar tool than the one that you have developed, except that at this point, we are still in the process of the approval of the European Data Protection Board, while, as you have already mentioned, your code has been already approved in May 2021, if I recall that correctly. So it's about 2 years ago. For this reason, I guess that some of our members might be wondering, why CSA decided to initiate this collaboration with Scope Europe and with the European Cloud Code of Conduct. I was wondering if you can help me in detailing for our audience and for our community the reason that pushed us towards this collaboration. Certainly, I can interject a certain point and provide the CSA perspective, but certainly I guess that our community is going to be curious to understand why you guys decided to partner with us.
Sure, and very good question, Daniele. So considering the background that I just gave on my introduction, I believe that you can already really easily pinpoint some synergies between our activities, and not only when it comes to data protection and your particular efforts when it comes to the code of conduct itself, but more generally. And so we have, on the one hand, CSA, which is a leading market player in the development and administration of IT security certification schemes. And on the other hand, you have the EU Cloud Code of Conduct, which is a pioneer when it comes to the development of codes of conduct under the GDPR. And so you have this, one hand, IT security standards, which are solidified, largely adopted, and very well-known tools in the market for public and private stakeholders, especially when you're talking about schemes such as those under the CSA Star Registry. On the other hand, you have data protection standards, in particular GDPR codes of conduct, which are much younger, you can say, especially in the format that GDPR has put forward, as I mentioned before. But despite of being relatively young and not as mature or disseminated as IT security certifications, the reality is that robust data protection regulations are a clear tendency and they're here to stay, right? Therefore, advancing data protection solutions that enable the industry to demonstrate compliance with GDPR and while remain innovative, as it has been done with IT security standards in other contexts, but with very similar goals, it's simply crucial in this context. So especially when you're talking about highly innovative industries such as the cloud industry, it's very important to bring in to this specific context that we are operating in, because you were talking about a highly innovative industry that needs flexible and yet strong solutions to demonstrate compliance. And they're also accessible. This is a key point here. You were talking about a highly diverse industry. A lot of times people think about cloud industry and you think about those huge players and you think about more typically about infrastructure as a service, but you have so many software providers and platform providers. So this is a very, very diverse ecosystem. Therefore, to find solutions that are accessible, that fit all size companies, all size providers, and that can really harmonize the implementation of a set of rules, in this case of GDPR, is crucial. And I think it goes very much hand in hand with what you guys have been implementing in the IT security field. So I think against this background, it's really safe to say that IT security and data protection are simply two core concerns for cloud service providers everywhere, and having mechanisms to demonstrate the implementation of appropriate technical and organizational measures in those two fields is indispensable to build trust towards cloud users and supervisory authorities. Then, with this whole background and taking these two experiences that are different but yet complementary, as I mentioned, and finding venues to collaborate where each player can contribute in its own area of expertise in order to continually develop, improve, and boost those tools is the ultimate goal here. And that, I firmly believe, has great added value for the international cloud community. But I would like to also hear from you.
Oh,
What
sure.
do you believe is the great added value of this
No,
partnership?
sure. Yeah, no, before our community starts, thinking about, us as a schizophrenic community, looking, right and left and center. So the reason for us is very simple. The approach to CSA has always been very pragmatic, and we have been always try to look at excellence. No matter if the excellence, it was the result of something developed within the Cloud Security Alliance, so within our working groups, within our committees, or if it was coming from elsewhere. With that in mind, we saw over the course of the year in this kind of common path towards the approval of our respective code, and we have been comparing cards all along the way over the past 5 years. And certainly there is the certainty that we have been interacting with a group of people, with an organization that is very like-minded with CSA. In addition, there is also a pragmatic angle there, and as you know, and possibly our members are not aware of it, but there is substantial degree of overlap between the membership of the EU Cloud Code of Conduct and the CSA membership. There are a bunch of organizations, especially the leading organization within the EU Cloud Code of Conduct, such as Google and Oracle and IBM, which are of course also key members of the Cloud Security Alliance. So from one side, there is certainly a clear opportunity to join forces towards a common goal. From the other side, as I said, we recognize the extremely high technical value of the work that has been done within the EU Cloud Code of Conduct. As you said, Gabriela, the key word here is certainly synergies. And we believe that while the code that you have developed, it's a great piece of technical work to address some of the issue in the space of code of conduct. The work that we have done is also extremely well done, and it might be a good foundation, and it is a good foundation for a future certification, which is another area of cooperation that we're going to explore together. Now, we're not going to drill down on the certification aspect and the differences with the code of conduct just now. We're going to touch on it in a few seconds. Then, certainly, there is also the fact that we were amazed by the expertise that especially Scope Europe has in terms of monitoring body activities. As Gabriela mentioned in the beginning, one of the key aspects of the GDPR Code of Conduct, and now, without entering too much into the numbering and technicalities, so the reference to the Article 41 of the GDPR, and Scope Europe has a long history of managing Code of Conduct. This is something that, Gabriela, I guess you didn't mention in the beginning, but Scope has been administering and managing several different Code of Conducts. And that is, an expertise that is very specific. It entails the presence of know-how that you can't certainly build from one day to another. So certainly for us, making sure that we can collaborate with such an organization that has such high expertise and value and know-how in the space of monitoring the activities of a code of conduct is a certainly big plus. From our perspective, again, it makes sense from the technical perspective, from the marketing perspective, and especially it makes sense for the community. We want to make sure that through our programs and our STAR program specifically, we can offer the best possible solution for governance and compliance. And this is, again, it builds on the overall idea of the STAR program, and especially our STAR registry component, which we are planning to be as the go-to place for any organizations, cloud service customer or providers or regulators that would like to have a good and global understanding about the security and privacy posture of an organization or a cloud, or better said, of a cloud service. So being able to host the result of the European Code of Conduct in our registry is going to be, from our perspective, a gigantic plus for the overall cloud community. So basically, that's our perspective there. Now, we mentioned briefly, we quickly touched upon the topic of certification. As some of you might be aware of, GDPR has essentially two main compliance mechanisms. One is the Code of Conduct that we are discussing, so Article 40 and Article 41, but then there is also a certification based on the GDPR requirements, Articles 42 and 43. Would you like to help me in elaborating what are the differences, and then eventually we can, jump on the possible opportunities for future developments there?
Yeah, this is a very important point, and we often get questions in this regard. So when it comes to GDPR, codes of conduct and certifications, they have quite similar goals and similar roles, as they both provide mechanisms to demonstrate compliance under GDPR. They are different in the way they are built. However, the goal is pretty similar, as I mentioned, and they also bring up quite similar legal benefits. So on the one hand, you have, for instance, the specificities. If you want to dig in a little bit more on that, you have the monitoring body, which I mentioned, which is a very specific mechanism to oversee compliance. And as you mentioned, that Scope Europe has developed it, the expertise in this field, and that it carried a lot from its parent organization established in the German market, and that has been working with the development and implementation of codes of conduct for over a decade. So you have those on the side of codes of conduct that have this very unique principle of ongoing due diligence, because a monitoring body has to have a complaints mechanism, for example, has to monitor the implementation on an ongoing basis, has to monitor, for instance, media reports or any sort of indication that there might be a breach to the code. So this idea of ongoing due diligence is very important. However, on the other hand, you have certification bodies that also need to be accredited as the monitoring body. And certifications also go through a tough approval process, just as codes of conduct. So in the end of the day, they have their differences, but as I mentioned, the goal is quite similar and the legal benefits are quite similar. You can go into very specific details here and there. There are not many, actually, when it comes to their differences. If you look at the regulation, you have one slight difference when it comes to data protection impact assessments, where COCs must be taken into consideration, Article 35. On the other hand, for international data transfers, certifications don't need a general validity, another step to become operational, as codes of conduct do. Therefore, it's quite balanced, and there's no right answer here. On someone asks, it's very often that someone asks, but why would you go for a code of conduct or certification? What is the best solution? There's no perfect answer. It really depends on the specific context that you were talking about. And I think that was the very goal of the regulator, to give those options. I think certifications, as I mentioned, are very much known in the market already, which is something important to be taken into consideration. Codes of conduct are being built, but also create great added value when it comes to GDPR compliance, but they are in the process of being established and solidified in the markets. So it really depends on which context we are talking about here.
Gabriela, may I ask you a question here? Because and this is something that maybe you can help me in clarifying. What I've been hearing or overhearing over the course of the few years is that there is a sort of general assumption that certification might be considered a bit more rigorous, and certainly are going to be much more expensive than a code of conduct. So, as I said, there is this sort of like perception that maybe a code of conduct is a better solution for offering a compliance tool to small and medium companies, while a certification, being it's likely to be more expensive, is more targeting like a larger organization. Is that something you would agree with?
Yes, Daniela, this is also a good question, and no, I don't agree with that. I think those tools are quite flexible, and you are a great example with the CSA Star Registry. You can build schemes that are accessible, that fit different size companies, that really leverage their differences. So I don't think this is, this is also just something that I also think comes from before, this perception that certifications already on the market are more expensive. But no, that's not. And also the requirement to be accessible is there for both under GDPR. So regardless of whatever happens or whatever has been implemented in the market for certification schemes for IT security or for whatever else, this is something else for GDPR. And I don't believe there's such a, I think the whole added value of these tools, as I mentioned, is this flexibility, is the fact that you can tailor into the specific needs of a certain sector or a segment of a sector. And as I said, this is particularly relevant when you talk about sectors such as the cloud industry, which is quite diverse. I think there are many options and not a perfect solution. It really depends, as I said, sounding like a lawyer, but it really depends. In some cases, a code of conduct would be the better option. In other cases would be a certification, and in some cases both. Having some redundancies can make a lot of sense, especially when you talk about complex processing activities. When you talk about the cloud sector, I think many redundancies are welcome in those contexts, because you just have such an asymmetric environment with many different players. But again, CSA is a great example in this regard. In the CSA Star Registry, you don't have only the big players, you have several smaller providers. Therefore, there is a way to find solutions that fit everyone in both cases for codes of conduct and certifications.
Perfect. So let's make a small jump back. I mentioned earlier that your code has been approved exactly 2 years ago. So by the way, happy birthday for your, second anniversary. I think our audience might appreciate if you can give us, a bit of, if you can share with us your experience of the last 2 years, what happened after the approval, what have been the lessons learned, what has been the kind of key messages and highlights from those members and those companies that have been adhering to your code of conduct. So yeah, please share with us your experience of the last 2 years.
Yes, I think this is the first code to become operational. So obviously there are a lot of elements that are new and that we're tackling on a daily basis to really optimize the whole scheme. But the interesting thing is, because sometimes you look at it and you think, okay, it has been approved for 2 years, and this is something extremely new. But the efforts on the code started in 2012. I think this is an important remark to be made. Is not to discourage the ones that are planning to design a code of conduct. Please, I think, kind of open the way, and for sure the processes will be faster. They're still complex. You know, you can share the insights on that. They're still complex, and I think both industry and as well as the authorities are still figuring it out as this thing is being implemented. But efforts started in 2012, as I said, so over a decade ago. Under the commission, there was a working group under the commission to really boost the adoption of cloud computing, to build trust. And by that, they had a working group for the development of code of conduct, but under the directive, so the predecessor, as I mentioned before. So this is a very mature piece of work. So it's not it's not that well developed because it has been developed a couple of years ago, but it's been many years of meaningful exchange between the industry, the authorities, in this case also the commission, as it started there, and the working group was being hosted by the commission up until a certain point where the industry fully took over, and the founding members then came to Scope Europe to finalize the draft and to adapt the first draft to GDPR, because GDPR was coming into force, so you needed to adapt. And the major adaptation was also the monitoring body. And the idea was to really build a code that could be monitored. And this is something we talk about monitoring by design, but it's very important, because a lot of exercises have been done in the way that you develop the code and afterwards you try to develop how to monitor the compliance. But in this case, we were able to merge that and to make sure that code requirements could be assessed by an independent third party, being the monitoring body, being Scope Europe. So a very long journey there, also a long journey in the formal approval itself, from the moment that we have submitted, already Scope Europe working on that, when we have submitted to our lead data protection authority, which is the Belgium Data Protection Authority, as is the transnational code of conduct. That's a crucial difference. The approval process goes to the DPB. As you mentioned, that's where the CSA code is now. And you know, and you can certainly echo what I'm saying, it's a long process. And there are a lot of guidelines as well that came along throughout the process. You know, I think that's, as I said, this is not this is not a small effort. You were talking about all member states coming together, agreeing on something. This doesn't happen every day for anything, let alone for data protection, which is also something new. And you need to harmonize these different legal backgrounds of all these authorities and all these players that are involved in the industry. And this was a very difficult exercise also because the scope of the code. So this is a code that you can think like, oh, this is only is for the cloud and is only for Article 28 and its related articles, so processing activities. So the scope is very narrow, right? No, it's actually extremely complex to put forward a tool that tackles all processing activities for all types of personal data. And so having that okay from that green light from the DPB is a long journey, but that creates a lot of legal certainty, and that's very important, especially for the smaller players that don't have massive resources to demonstrate compliance. So if you can implement a tool that is accessible and that has been checked by the authorities, that's certainly a great added value. But again, as I mentioned, something new that the market is not yet so familiar with as they are with certifications. So it's a path towards, you know, the let's say market dissemination of this tool. But today, I mean, we have over 1,200 and almost 300 services that have declared adherence to the code. It's really, and what we hear, the testimonies are really positive, and we see that you have a chance to really harmonize those practices and robust technical and implementation measures on a daily basis. And again, the fact that you have, you know, the seal from the authorities is great added value. So the cloud service providers, they come, they take a look, and they can, fit their technical and organizational measures against those standards that are approved. So far, the feedback has been quite positive. It's not without obstacles, as I said, as it's something is still being implemented. But however, it's also something interesting to mention that although the code has been approved in 2021, as well as the monitoring body has been accredited, so the code became operational because those two elements they walk hand in hand. We were already having a trial period before, so we were already actually monitoring. Some companies already declared adherence before the approval, which was a great exercise to make sure that the whole assessment process was on point. And by the time we were approved, I think we already have built quite great and unique expertise on the field. So yeah.
Thanks for that, Gabriela. So unfortunately, we are kind of running out of time. So we almost got at the end of this session. As you said, I mean, that process of generating awareness and understanding of nuances and of a code of conduct and the difference between certification and now, this can help organization of any size and any business sector in order to address the issue of compliance for GDPR. I hope that this first chat has been really the beginning of that process of awareness and dissemination that both Scope Europe and Cloud Security Alliance can work together. As I mentioned, we are in the process of signing a collaboration agreement. For now, we have an MLU in place. We hope that later in the year we're going to fully formalize our agreement. But the idea here is really let's join forces in order to keep on disseminating the usefulness and the value of the code of a code of conduct for GDPR compliance, to have that information, that crucial piece of information for the overall cloud governance of an organization within our star registry, and then of course work jointly together to the development of a certification. As you said, the beauty is in the diversity, and we want to make sure that we are offering to our communities the most flexible offering that we can think of. With that in mind, I would like to give you floor for 30 seconds if you want to have any concluding statement, or simply to say, see you next time to our audience.
No, thank you, Daniele. And it has been a pleasure, first of all, and to have this talk. And I mean, I think to concretize everything, because this is obviously a very concrete topic. So I think to translate it to your audience, it's important to maybe give it a little hint that the idea is actually to allow CSA Star Registry members, companies, to declare adherence to the EU Cloud CUC, and you will have all the specificities on how this process shall take place and so forth. We still, Scope Europe, still the monitoring body, everything basically happens in the same way as any other company that has declared adherence, not via CSA, but this is something that facilitates the declaration of adherence via the CSA Star Registry, and enables more companies, enables the dissemination of this tool that has proven to, as I mentioned, have really great added value and bring legal certainty, accountability, transparency when it comes to GDPR compliance. So this is the concrete idea. Make sure you stay tuned for further developments. There will be a pre-registry coming up soon, and you will have all the information on both of our websites, on the CSA side, on the uCloud CUC side, just to concretize a little bit this discussion and to make it clear to the members that there is something coming up and there is great added value for them, and they should really, again, stay tuned for further development. So again, thank you very much. It's a pleasure and really looking forward to the next steps on this collaboration.
Well, it has been certainly my pleasure, Gabriela. Thank you so much. And once again, to all our community, please stay tuned and start checking the European Cloud Code of Conduct. And if you have any requests for clarification, please do not hesitate in getting in contact with either Gabriela or myself. And with that, I would like to wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.